Hello, guys. Welcome back or welcome to another episode of Unbalanced with me, Cerys Davage. How are we all doing? I'm excited because today we've got a new guest on the podcast, Jack. Hello.
Hi, Karis. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to speak to you because I've come across a lot of your videos on TikTok, so much that I had to just follow you and get to know you a bit more and invite you on the podcast. So tell us a bit about yourself. Where are you from and what do you do?
Thanks, yeah, and thanks for having me on. I'm really glad to be joining you. So I'm 24 from Dublin. I got a double hip replacement about a year ago. So I guess for the past year, I've just been sharing my journey, my road to recovery. It's not really something you see every day, and that kind of prompted me to want to share it because I didn't really see anyone else going about, sharing their recovery and sharing the journey. Because apart from getting a double hip replacement, I'm just kind of your average guy. I did business in college. I'm training to be a chartered accountant. I like football. I like sports. Like there's honestly, I'm not a very interesting person apart from the double hip replacement. But I guess that's the thing that like it's just one of those things that can happen to anybody, and I think that's something that you kind of talk about too. That like it's not like you have to be a particular type of person to have health issues at a young age. And I think when I was going for my double hip replacement, I did kind of feel like the odd one out. So I guess since I've been sharing my journey, it's been nice to see that there's loads of other people in the same position as me. I even saw a guy who's playing football at quite a high level in England who actually had birthdays and had a double hip replacement. So yeah, it's been nice kind of coming across other people in this kind of world who are sharing their health experiences at a young age, because I think in your day-to-day life you don't really see it that often.
Definitely. And that's one thing that I realized when I saw your videos was like, okay, he's got a double hip replacement and he's literally my age. Like, what happened there? Because, obviously, I think there is that stereotype that they are for like older people when their hips start to go. I've got some relatives that are a lot older that have had hip replacements. So I've always like kind of categorized that as like not something to worry about at this age, but it clearly is. And I think that the fact that you've been so open speaking about it is so good and so important because, like you said, disabilities and having these kind of changes can happen to anyone. I think there's definitely a gap in the market for you to shout about this because I had never seen anything like that before. So tell us a bit about what led you to getting that double hip replacement to begin with.
I'll do my best to cut a really long story short, but I guess you're right. Like it is like an old person's operation. It's not really something you see young people getting, which is a good and a bad thing because you don't want to be seeing a ton of young people getting hip replacements. Like it's not something that you should have to get done. But for many people, if like any joint in your body, if your joint goes bad, there's very little you can do to really fix that problem without replacing the joint. So I guess to give a bit of backstory, I had a degenerative disease in my hips from childhood. I usually, when I'm telling my story, I say from around age 5. Kind of from around age 4 or 5, I started getting quite bad pain in my hip, which obviously at that age I didn't really understand what was going on, and my parents didn't either. And like many kids who experience health issues at a young age, had a hard time getting a diagnosis. It took them about a year. Some people told them that it was a hernia. I think one specialist even told them that they were worried it could be a tumor, because I guess it's quite a rare disease. It affects roughly 1 in 25,000 children. And I think out of every child who has birthdays, it's only 1 in 10 who actually get it in both hips. So I guess you're saying a quarter of a million odds there, really.
Wow.
Um, so it just finding the right specialist to diagnose me with Perthes disease. It's where blood flow is cut from the femoral head of the hip. So if blood stops flowing to a bone, it's going to stop growing and it's going to decompose and break down. So having that from a young age just meant that I never really had a fair shot at having normal hips. I actually am very grateful that I didn't have Perthes as badly as some kids who end up needing surgery during childhood, who are put in a brace, who get screws put in. I'm very grateful that I actually didn't need any of that. It was just a case of having quite a difficult 5 or 6 years in childhood, from around age 5 till 10. It just meant I had a heavy limp. I had pain with every step. I, struggled to walk up and down the stairs in primary school, and I didn't really understand why. Didn't really understand why I had to stop playing football and GAA. So it was difficult. It was hard feeling like the odd one out at a young age, and I guess it was worse. I didn't really understand what was going on. I think you're just too young to really get it. So it was quite tough when it kind of came back around age 18. I say came back because from age 10 to 18, I was living life 99% normally. I was playing sports, I was trying to climb back up the ladder and take control of my life and kind of get past it. And it just one day, unexpectedly, I was in work, I was working in a restaurant. I bent down to pick up the dishwasher and I felt the shooting pain in my hip. And that pain just never went away. It was quite scary. Lo and behold, after getting an MRI, I had no cartilage left in my joints. It was just bone on bone. Your hips kind of meant to operate like this. It's meant to have space and fluidity, but mine was more or less locked with no
Oh.
cartilage left. And just even seeing the image, yeah, it's not nice. But what was worse was being told, yeah, your hips are just going to get worse and worse until eventually you'll get your double hip replacement. I said, okay, well, how long do I have to wait? Because I'm in pain now and it's just going to keep getting worse. And I was told I'd have to wait until my 40s at least. This is at age 18. So
That's a long
that's,
time to be going with that.
yeah, a
Wow.
long time. And it's actually, I've come to learn since sharing my journey, this is far more common than you would think. Understandably, most surgeons don't want to give a replacement hip to someone young because it's not ideal. It's they have a lifespan and it would require doing a second replacement and maybe even a third one. But you can't really just tell someone, yeah, you're going to be in pain for the next 20 years and that's it. So that was really, really hard, honestly. And it's a big reason why I'm so passionate about kind of sharing my journey now, because it's been a hard 5 years before finally getting the operation. It was 5 years of just my quality of life going downhill, my ability to do things going downhill. And I struggled with that, knowing that there was a solution out there. I think I maybe would have had an easier time accepting it if there was nothing they could do, but it was just like it was being held back from me, and it kind of just, yeah, I found that hard, and that's kind of why as soon as I got the operation, I said, well, surely there's other young people going through this too, because I can't be the only one.
Mm. Wow. Well, thank you for walking us through that. It sounds really tough. And like you said, knowing that there is actually a solution, they're just holding it back from you. That sounds like the most frustrating thing, especially at age 18, when you want to go out and you want to hang out with your mates and you can finally, go clubbing and drinking and you do all the things that 18-year-olds want to do. How did you find that period like navigating your pains and your social life at the same time?
That's a great question, because that was probably one of the biggest things that was affected. And I know you did an episode kind of touching on this topic before that I thought was really interesting, that it's not something that normal 18-year-olds are going to understand, even if you try and explain it to them. But I had a hard time explaining what I was going through, because you tell someone that you've got pain in your hip and they don't really compute how hard it actually is. So I noticed over time, as the months went on, I was having to withdraw far more, especially in college. It actually just so happened that the pandemic hit when my hips got particularly bad. So it was a case of when everyone was going back to normal life, maybe around 2021, 2022, when the pandemic was finally over, I guess, I couldn't make that return. I was staying exactly where I was, which was hard, because as much as my very close friends understood why I was in such a bad way, people in college didn't really understand why I wasn't coming in. You hear chatter, you hear people saying, oh, well, he doesn't want to come to class, he's just not bothered or whatever. And I'm at home really wanting to make it in, but I couldn't because the hip pain was too bad. I just found it hard to navigate, especially because it's kind of like a hidden disability for me. Like, you would never tell that I've got, two arthritic hips. And I don't think you could ever tell with anybody, but I just think I look like the last person who would be going through that. I remember just feeling so anxious going into college because it just felt like I was an imposter or something. I'm looking around and no one can see what I'm going through, and it was hard to process. And I'm sure you've probably found out yourself, like if it's not immediately visible, it's a hard feeling.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm totally with you there. And like it's frustrating when you don't want to be known for your disability, but you want people to understand at the same time. Like you said, you're just an average guy from Dublin, you know? And if people want to assume that you're not turning up to classes just because, oh, you know, like he's just ditching them, classic. But you want them to understand that it is something much deeper than that, but you also don't want to be known for that. You don't want that to be like your whole personality at the same time, and for them to think of your hips when they think of you, you know? So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, there is definitely like a weird in between that you want to be seen and understood because the disability is invisible, but you also don't want people to pity you or to like not include you in things because they think that it's too difficult for you. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And how do you strike that balance when you don't get to decide how people make their mind up about you? That's one of
Mm,
the harder parts. And it's more about accepting it than anything, because you're right, like you want to tell people so that they can understand, but then you don't want people to see you any differently. And to be honest, a lot of people naturally do see you differently. You know, if they don't have friends and family who are going through health issues, they're going to see you differently. And I think there's a certain element of accepting that and just saying, you know, well, it is what it is. But that took me time. It definitely wasn't something that I was able to do in the beginning. So I probably went back to college after, I think it would have been third year of my degree, when we finally got back in the building after the pandemic, and I didn't tell anyone. And then I think by the end of final year, I kind of realized, well, I should probably say something. But I found a huge difference when I started my full time job. I said it from the get go, from day one, so that was just, people knew that's exactly who I was, and it was a huge relief. I think that's probably something that I wish I could tell myself earlier. I probably should have just been more open about it from the get go. Like obviously I am being open about it now to a lot of people. Better late than never, but it definitely is one of those things that it really takes time, and it's a lot harder, I think, than most people realize.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I'm proud of you for telling your workmates about it because it can be such a scary thing, and like I said, you know, you don't wanna be known for it, but like you said, it's a relief. It's something that, you know, they know about now, and you're advocating for yourself at the same time. And what did you study and what is your work? Like, what do you do?
Thanks, I appreciate that, and it was kind of just the only way to go. I just couldn't do another. Well, I didn't know how long I was going to be in the job, so I couldn't do another potential 5 years or something with people not knowing. It's in accounting and finance, so I did business and management in college, and believe it or not, I kind of chose the lane I would go down in order to suit my situation the best. Like you're allowed to choose whatever classes you want to choose to major in. So you could go down the route of accounting, you could do economics, marketing. It was kind of one of those pretty general courses where you could choose your fate. And I kind of knew that accounting is one of those roles that a lot of it is work from home. A lot of it's reliable. I'm kind of a numbers guy, so it suited me. And I'm basically in a graduate program now, so it's around a 4 year program where you work, but then you study for the chartered accounting exams outside of work. And in a way, I kind of gave myself a massive bit of work to do. You know, signing up for more exams after college when I barely got through the college exams, it doesn't really make sense on paper, but I also didn't want to let my situation and my pain kind of hold me back, because that's what I would have done if not for my hips going bad. So I wanted to stick with it. So I'm in the job about 2.5 years. I'm about halfway through those accounting exams. I did have to postpone a full year of them for the operation, which was definitely worth doing, because trying to work full time and study for exams after work when I couldn't sit in the chair for longer than 10 or 15 minutes at a time without pain, it was impossible. So it was definitely worth putting them on hold to get the operation. And now I'm kind of hoping, when I've got these exams coming up in the summer, that like I can sit in this chair pain free and actually not struggle for once. Because apart from that, I like the job. I can work from home, most of the week. I try and make it into the office around once a week at the moment, and I'm hoping I can kind of increase that. But it is good. I've found just the stability of the job and the maneuverability of working from home really good, because I never would have been able to go into the office 5 days a week. If I did, I actually turned down job offers from places who didn't have work from home
Mm,
because I just knew it wouldn't work.
mm. Yeah, it's all about that balance, pardon the pun, but, it is about that, finding something that works for you and being strong enough to turn things down that won't suit for you, won't suit you. You said you find sitting down for a long period of time too painful?
Yeah,
Okay, interesting.
and standing for too long was painful too. So there was like nothing I could do before that would just give me relief. It's complicated, but it makes sense when you think about it, because
Mm,
when you're sitting down, your hip joint's at a 90-degree angle, and that means that, like, I did this earlier, like it's basically your hip getting trapped in the joint, and that kind of burning pain through the front of the hip. If anyone else is watching this who has had hip issues, or hip arthritis or anything, they're going to get it. Like, that burning pain would just flare up when you're sitting down, and then you think, okay, well, maybe you stand instead, but then you can't really stand for too long either. So it was I'd just be up and down. It'd be a nightmare.
mm.
I That's one of those things I don't miss. Like, someone in work asked, like, what's one of the biggest differences since getting the operation, and I actually said just being able to do my normal 9 to 5, which most people, I'm not going to say people take for granted being able to just work a normal 9 to 5, because a lot of jobs aren't great. And I think most people don't like their jobs, but it's a lot harder to do your job when you can't just sit at your desk without being in pain, especially when
Mm.
my old surgeon told me to get a desk job because anything else I wouldn't be able to do. It's like I couldn't even do that properly.
Wow, that is tough to hear though from a surgeon, like your options are very limited by the way. And if you had a dream of doing a job that's really physical, then I would nip that in the bud now.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's the problem. Yeah,
Even though I obviously don't have the bone like hip issues, I can relate in a way that relates to my muscles, obviously. For me, sitting down for a long time is, it's good to like rest and relax and whatever. But as soon as I stand up, I feel like a grandpa that's like hasn't stood up for years. Like I'm so stiff, like and if I start walking, my body's not like warmed up to just go, and I get like sciatica or I get just like other really bad pains. So for me, it is like finding the balance of sitting down and keeping moving at the same time. And I
yeah,
really struggle to be on my feet for a long time. Like if I'm stood in a conversation with someone, there will be a point where I'm like, "I'm so sorry, I have to sit down." It is like a bit of back and forth and you're never like completely comfortable in one position. Um,
yeah.
so
And that
I
can be hard, especially
mm,
in, like, did you find that hard in university? Probably sitting in some lecture hall for 2 hours, not able to take that break or get a comfortable seat.
Actually, I studied theatre, so it was quite a physical course, and I actually really struggled with that, and I was like, I had to, like, sit some of the exercises out because I was just so tired and I needed to sit down. So for me, it was like a case of being on my feet too much. So maybe that's why I didn't really realize that being sat down for a very long time was bad for me until after uni when I was getting into, office jobs or jobs where I'd be sat working from home and I realized that I hadn't been up all morning. That is kind of where I started to realize that there was an issue with sitting down for a long time as well. And also, with my condition, you have to try and keep as much of your muscles like moving as much as you can. And it is,
Yeah.
without overdoing it either. So it is about like trying to just do it little and often, as much as you can. But yeah, my main problem in uni was going to like clubs and bars, and I would just be dancing or standing for way too long. My friends would literally have to force me to sit down.
I always struggle to get a seat because, there'd actually even be times where I might see people sitting down and I'd have to kind of say, sorry, would you mind if I sit down? And if it's, 1 in the morning in a pub in town, someone is probably going to be like along the lines of, what are you talking about? Like, why would you need to sit down? And I'm not going to get stuck into my whole story there and then. So that, I'm sure you've probably been in that situation where you often end up just not going out. Like, is it weird to Google the place you're going and see if they've chairs? Because that's something I've done. Like, God, I could tell you
Definitely
what
not
type of
weird.
seats every place in Dublin has, honestly. Because if it was a place that didn't have seats, or if had high stools, which just were a killer for me, it'd be a no-go. And I'm still trying to tell my girlfriend now that, like, we don't have to consider those things, that we can go to any bar, even if the chairs suck, because it doesn't matter anymore. I'm nearly
Mm.
trying to, like, fix that train of thought because it was my reality for so long.
Honestly, I totally get that. Like, I hate places where the seats are too low because I don't have the strength to get up from them, or I would need to
Yeah.
bring someone with me that's able to lift me up. Like, I'm literally dead weight. Like, if someone picks me up, like, I don't have any strength to help the process of standing back up. So someone, if they have to pick me up, they have to take the whole, like, all of the weight. So I don't want to ask like a random stranger to do that. So yeah, I'm definitely used to looking up places beforehand. So you're not alone there. And it's a very, very common thing for anyone with a disability. But I know it's like especially within my community, we've talked about this a lot. We all seem to be looking up places beforehand and figuring out what type of seats they are and things like that. And I've definitely had the look of like, why do you need that chair? Like, why are you struggling? Why do you need to sit down? And now it just gets to the point where I can just be like, I have a disability, but I'm not going to get into that now. Here's my card about my podcast. You give that a listen. So now
Nice,
after
that's
this
great.
episode, you can just refer people to this episode. So there you
I
go.
will, yeah, I'll send them the link. Yeah.
I want to ask you about your surgery and how it was like, after that. You said you don't have to worry about things like that anymore. What's that transition been like, since getting that surgery?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy journey, because it's been just over a year now, and it was kind of like one step back, two steps forward, because the initial months were an extremely tough recovery, but I've been improving continuously. It's kind of crazy, because getting both hips done is very unorthodox, but in my situation, it was what my surgeon elected for. It was a combination of I had a leg length difference before the surgery, because my right hip was so worn. There was about a 2 centimeter difference, and that sounds like a lot, but
Oh,
there's some people who have 4 or 5, but like 2 centimeters still, that was
what?
like wearing an insole about this thick in my right shoe for the past few years. So he
Wow.
wanted to do both together to get the legs the same length. And he also thought that, apart from my hip issues, I'm healthy and fit otherwise. So he thought that I could kind of do the difficult recovery, that I'd be okay for it. What he didn't tell me was that you need a good leg for everything. Like, if you're on crutches, I kind of I had to use crutches without being able to plant either foot, which was basically me like swinging my body. So it was kind of funny in one way, but then you just kind of think those first few weeks of recovery, I think you get one hip done, you think, okay, well, I'll use my good leg to get out of bed, I'll use it to get up the stairs, but I didn't have that benefit. So it just made for an extremely tough first few weeks. Like, really, really tough, harder than I thought. And that's just one of those things that I try and share as well. I try and say that, like, I'm as positive as I can be, but I also want to be honest, because I think a lot of people head into hip replacement not knowing just how hard it is. That's probably the number one thing I get people messaging or commenting about, saying, "Oh, on day 4, I feel like I'm dying. Like, I did not know it was going to be this hard." So it's by no means is it a walk in the park. I think a lot of people, especially in the US, who are older, they can get a minimally invasive operation. So they can get it through the front of the hip, and they don't have to cut through muscles, and they're walking at a hospital the next day. That's not the experience that most people with serious hip issues get. You're getting, the real thing, and it is a hard recovery. But I would say from around the 3 month mark is when I was able to start rebuilding. I would say, off crutches, back to work, back driving, able to go out and do things. I actually went to a concert standing. It would have been around 14 or 15 weeks post op. Sorry, I was still limping a lot. I was still kind of in pain, but even though my legs were super weak, and even though I was only off crutches a matter of weeks, I was able to stand at a concert for about an hour and a half, even better than I ever was before. The second they replace your hips, that hip pain you had in the joint, is gone overnight. The only pain you're dealing with is trying to fix your muscles, and I'm sure you know all about that. My hip muscles are still a bit confused because they've had bad joints to work around for 23 years, and now they've got metal ones to try and adjust to. So there's a lot of work that goes into that and the rehab and the recovery. So, I've been rebuilding since the 3 month mark. From about 6 months is when I felt really good, where I kind of started feeling more like myself again. Because the operation getting such a big setback, it really, you don't feel like yourself for a while. And I found it very tough mentally, to kind of try and keep the strength, keep going, especially after such a hard few years. But I would say from around the 6 month mark until now, I've been getting better and better, and I'm finally at that point now where I can kind of say I've made it, because I'm not fully recovered, because my left hip still has a bit of work to do, but my right hip is 100%. It feels like a normal hip, and I can start living life normally now, I think, and try and put this behind me in a way and kind of move on, which is something I never thought I'd be able to say, but it is exciting.
That's so nice. That's so lovely to hear. Like you've gone through so much and you've come out so strong and you've built that resilience and that patience. It sounds like a lot of patience, waiting those 5 years for the operation and then just waiting for your muscles to slowly get used to your new hips and for you to rebuild that strength. And you've obviously been sharing a lot of your recovery journey on TikTok as well and Instagram. First of all, when did you start doing that? What made you want to start sharing your journey online?
That's a great question, and it's funny because I've a few memories to stick out in the weeks in the run up to the operation. It was at the beginning of February last year, so from the turn of the new year, I actually remember on New Year's Eve saying, my New Year's resolution is I really love to make a video, like just one about my operation when I get it done, just in case someone else with Perthes sees it. I kind of crunched the numbers and I thought, well, if 1 in 25,000 people have it, well then, if I can make a video that somehow gets maybe 50,000 views, then maybe someone will see it. And the more I thought about it, I thought, you know what, I should probably just do this. So I waited until about 2 months after, or 2 weeks after the operation, sorry. And I mean, I was sitting on the couch there, nothing better to do. So I made a video about my experience. I had 3 or 4 people message me who were in their early 20s with Perthes disease in Ireland and the UK, and it was
What?
just incredible because I'd never met anyone who had Perthes disease before. It was mind blowing. It was crazy. I couldn't believe that, you know, putting a CapCut video up on my TikTok meant that I was getting to talk to other people who were living the exact same experience as me. As soon as that kind of happened, I thought, well, I just have to keep doing this. Like, even if I didn't want to, I felt a bit of a responsibility almost, because I knew that there wasn't really people talking about this, especially not guys. I feel like in this kind of area online, I would go as far to say it's probably maybe 80%. It's like an 80-20 split. There just really aren't that many guys talking about it. So I kind of thought, well, I just want to be that person that I wish I'd seen before my operation. I was in hospital for 5 days, longest 5 days of my life, and I had plenty of time to see everything I could online about hip replacement, and I didn't see any young people talking about it, and I didn't see any guys talking about it. So I thought, well, let me put the information out there so that if another guy like me is heading in for a hip replacement, they can see a video of mine pop up on TikTok and maybe feel a little bit at ease. And that's what's carried me this whole time. It just gained momentum. It kept going and going and going. And I'm not sure if you had that moment yourself where maybe after a couple of months, it kind of hits you that you're sharing so much of yourself online and you kind of get cold feet for a little while and you think, oh, what am I doing? Because I never thought I'd do that. But I've always, kept in mind that I'm only doing this to help people and to raise awareness for the issues that people aren't really speaking about. Like you said earlier, there's a gap in the market. Like there honestly is. There's a gap in the market that I didn't even know existed. I didn't know there was this many people getting hip replacements, but I swear if I had to go back through every message, every comment that I've got, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of young people, and they're just people who've seen my videos. What about everyone who's actually out there? So it's been really, really enjoyable kind of raising awareness for that and just kind of connecting with other people. It's so cool getting a message from someone saying, you're the first other person I've seen getting a hip replacement young, you know, kind of
Wow.
like what I was like in the beginning. It's just, it's been really rewarding. And it kind of, I mean, how could I stop now? How could I just
Mm.
leave it here, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible what you've done. And not only have you managed to connect with so many people, which on one hand is kind of frustrating because, you have to do the work to find your community. You have to put yourself out there in order for people to message you. But, on the other hand, it's great that, you have been able to connect with the community. But also, you've been raising awareness and bringing these experiences to people's feeds that have maybe never ever seen anything like this before, like me. And I was like, wow, okay, this is actually really, really educational. And that's what I hope to do, not only connect with my community and make people feel less alone in their experiences, but also educate people who may not know much about invisible disabilities in young people, and just wanted to raise awareness of that. And yeah, the response has just been amazing. And yes, I definitely have moments where, especially with my podcast, when I'm editing back and I have to listen to my own voice a lot. And, everyone cringes at their own voice. And I
Of
do have
course,
those
yeah.
moments where I'm like, what am I saying? Like, this is useless. But then I realize, I think back of all the messages I've had, and they're all things like, wow, I really, really appreciate, I really needed this episode. Or like, it's so nice to know that, like, listening to you feels like listening to myself. And I just remember my why. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this to help other people. Like, let's push my pride aside. Other people clearly can tolerate my voice if they're listening to my podcast, so it's fine.
That's a good way of looking at it, yeah. Because I still, I mean, maybe finally accepting it, but yeah, I struggle badly at that. You know, how many times do you just hover over like the delete button because you're thinking, ah, you know.
Absolutely, you're not the only one, I promise. But your accent's great. You got, who doesn't want to listen to an Irish lad chat all day?
Thanks. Maybe it's the gap in the market because that's another thing I'm sure you found. Like, I feel like Ireland is so behind in terms of that, even compared to the UK. I feel like it's very uncommon for people to put themselves out there, and there's kind of a lot of judgment there. But it's kind of like, you know, when you see people talk about climbing cringe mountain, and it's like the people who be maybe saying stuff at the beginning are the people who'll be patting you on the back when you reach a certain point. You know, you just kind of have to think of it like that.
Exactly, yeah.
And
Cringe
in
Mountain,
fact,
I've
you
never
actually,
heard that.
oh, really? Oh, it's, well, it's just one of those things that I've seen pop up on my feed a few times. You know those people who like are content creators where they're saying they're like giving you tips and stuff. And I've just seen videos of someone saying that, like, think of content creation as cringe mountain, that like you start at the bottom, and until you reach a certain point, it really does feel like, you know, you're not going to get there. You feel like you're being cringy, and you feel kind of weird about it yourself. And then when you reach a certain point of success, it's like, you know, because you've hit that point, everything that you've done up until that point is no longer kind of cringy. People aren't judging you for it. It's kind of, I don't know if you'd call it a certain amount of followers online or a certain amount of views, but you know, you look at some successful creators and you think, wow, like they're doing so great. But there was probably people judging them when they only had like 1,000 followers, you know.
Mm,
It's just a
yeah.
good way to look at it. Or
Mm.
you just have to not, I think my operation really made me not care what people think. Coming from someone who cared so much about what people thought, but I just, with the amount of stares I get on the crutches and people looking and people making comments and asking me questions, I just had to, it was like exposure therapy in a way. It kind of
Yeah,
made
yeah.
me not care what people would think anymore. Like, I went to a gig, it was a comedy gig around 6 weeks post op, which was the absolute earliest I was advised to do anything. But it was my favorite comedian, and I had front row seats, and I didn't want to miss it. And I remember walking into the Three Arena in Dublin, and I had to walk on my crutches to the very front row with like security with me to help me in. And I turned around, and I'm not going to pretend like 10,000 people were looking at me because I'm not that absorbed, but a lot of people were staring, and it was like a shocking moment. And since then, I've just kind of cared less. It was kind of like, wow, I have like, I can see hundreds of people are looking at me, and I can see someone pointing and going like this. And, you know, I kind of just had to take that on the chin. And from then, I kind of haven't really cared about, you know, putting myself out there online, because I had to put myself out there nearly in person first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, okay, that's a very scary thought, but I like to see it now as like, you know, especially if there's like young kids or something and they're staring and they're watching me walk really funny. I'm like, this might be weird for them, but they need more representation. They need to see more people, more young people in wheelchairs, more young people with mobility aids or walking a bit differently or with disabilities in general. So I'm, if they're going to stay, I'm happy to be that person they're staring at. So hopefully it won't be as weird the next time they see someone with a disability.
Definitely, and it shouldn't ever be something that's out of the ordinary, and maybe it only is for them because they're not seeing it that often. But
Yeah.
especially with kind of hidden disabilities, I'm still kind of surprised at how uneducated most people are. And you kind of think,
Mm,
well, like, how do we fix that? Like, should it be taught in schools? Should it be, not really sure what the solution is there, but I do know that, let's say, the content you're creating and then some of the stuff I'm trying to do, I just feel like it has to be the type of thing that, you know, on social media, if enough people share their stories and show the behind the scenes, because that's the part that people don't get to see, I do think that's helping people become more kind of educated on the topic. Like some of my I actually do it on purpose. Some posts I've made before, I choose a photo of me where for the front photo that I look perfect, like I look like I'm just on holiday or in the gym or something, and then as the post goes on is when I'm showing the double hip replacement, I'm showing the crutches, I'm showing, because that's what people see. And when people see that and then they read the title, my disability, they kind of go, wait a second. But we need to get to a point where people don't have to see it to understand it. Like that shouldn't be shocking, It shouldn't be
mhm,
shocking that someone has a disability or an illness or a health issue that
mhm.
isn't visible. But unfortunately it is. It's shocking, and that's why we nearly have to use it to our advantage to try and kind of put it out there as much as we can, because it does give people a shock.
Yeah, it does, and it's frustrating that we're still at that point, but hopefully it'll get better. I just love catching people out, like, if anyone has the audacity, I can just say I have a disability, and usually that shuts them up.
Yeah,
Usually
yeah,
that
I
that
think
they're like, "Oh god, okay, I'm so sorry."
yeah, but you kind of feel like saying, "Why didn't you think of that in the first place?" You know?
Yeah, like, everyone's got something going on, do you know what I mean? Like, everyone's got, like, some kind of health issue or disability, and it's not like it's a really rare thing, which is weird that people still seem shocked when they see a young person with a disability. Like, there's a lot of conditions out there, you know? Open your open your brain a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're talking a lot about, raising awareness and misconceptions. I want to ask if there are any misconceptions about having a double hip replacement that you maybe want to share that you want people to know.
Yeah, there's one thing that comes to mind straight away, although there's a few. The assumption that it's somehow my fault has been a much more common thing than you would think. Um, I guess it's the whole, you're a young guy, you probably were playing sports and like ran them into the ground or something, which I mean, it doesn't draw a reaction out of me now, but you can imagine I'm out for a walk in the park down the road from here for the very first time after my operation. I'm going for a walk with my girlfriend, trying to do maybe 5 minutes on my crutches, and I run into people and they say, "Oh, were you playing rugby? Did you hurt yourself? What did you do to
What did you
yourself?"
do? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and listen, I can understand it, because you're not expecting anybody under the age of 60 to get a hip replacement naturally due to, health reasons. But that is hard. And I just do feel like, because I look like someone who would be sporty playing sports, maybe just people make that assumption. I guess it just goes to show how little people know about these rare diseases. Like my response is always no, I had a rare disease since childhood. It was degenerative and my hips needed to be replaced. And it's like people don't even know that that's a thing, like that's possible. People maybe just aren't open-minded enough. Like, there's so many different health issues and diseases and conditions out there that we don't even know about. So I don't expect people to know of Perthes disease. I think it's something that no one knows about really. I'm trying to change that, but I'd still like to hope that people maybe pause for a second before making judgments or making their minds up, because it is quite damaging. And I guess the part of it that frustrates me is that I've done everything in my power up until now to do my best to minimize my pain, minimize my hip damage. So the insinuation that I would be at fault is kind of hard to digest, you know?
Yeah. Well, that is some great advice for anyone listening that, or just anyone in general that, might immediately jump the gun and think that it's their fault, but actually there might be a lot more layers to it. So thank you for sharing that. And on the topic of advice, I would love to ask you a question that I ask all my interviewees at the end of the episode. What is your piece of advice to anyone who's struggling with a diagnosis or to your younger self?
The advice that I would give is that I think a lot of the difficulty with being open about your health issues or a diagnosis you've gotten, I find in my experience, it was refusing to accept it. I mentioned my experience in college earlier. Years of my life were a lot harder than they needed to be because I kept that to myself. And I just wish I'd shared earlier on. I wish I was more open about it because it's not something that we should have to hide. And I know there is that fear there that people treat you differently or judge you, but you'll come to realize that the people who do treat you differently and judge you aren't people you want in your life anyway. They're never going to be your best friends, and that's one of those things that you have to accept and say, you know what, that's fine, because it means that the people who are close with you in your life are going to be way more supportive then because they know you're struggling, they know what you're going through. And if you're not telling people about what you're going through, yes, you're not going to get any judgment, but you're not going to get that support either because people aren't aware of what you're going through. So, my best advice would be to be as open as you can be. Welcome the support and also welcome the judgment and accept it because, it is what it is. The people, it's actually a great filter. You'll really find out who your good friends are that way because the people who are there for you, who are going to support you, are the people you want in your life, and the people who aren't, you probably don't want to be friends with anyway. So it's a win-win.
Absolutely. It phases out all the bad people.
It does. It really does. It's actually a relief. And then I guess what I would say to my younger self is age 5 to 10, it was quite a long stint and quite a crucial part of your life, formative years. I guess I would just tell myself that it would all be okay because that's what I've been holding on to this whole time. I think if I didn't hold on to hope this whole time, I never would have made it this far. I certainly wouldn't have recovered from my operation. I guess what I'm trying to be is proof that there is light at the end of the tunnel because as much as I've held on to that thought over the years, in my lowest moments, I'm here thinking I'm never going to get there. And I see that so often, especially people in my position, young people needing hip replacements with hip issues. They're saying, I'm never going to get there. Even if I do get the operation, I'm not going to recover from it. And I just want to be proof that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And now I want to show what's possible. I want to figure out, can I run again? Can I play sports again? What can a young person with a double hip replacement do? Can you travel the world? What can you do? I just want to be that proof to my younger self that, it's all going to work out. And that just makes me think if I want to be that to my younger self, I want to be that to everyone else out there too. So that's what I'm determined to do now. I've recovered. My recovery, I guess, as such, is finished, but I'm only just starting to rebuild. And I would just love for someone younger, maybe 10. No one under 10 should be using social media, but maybe someone can see a video of mine of maybe me running a 5K next year and after getting a double hip replacement after lifelong hip issues, and maybe that can just be the proof that, it'll work out.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. There is always light at the end of the tunnel. And maybe you need to go into schools and start sharing your experience because you never know who's going to relate to it.
Thanks. That's actually something I'd love to do. Sometimes I wonder how do you go about those things, but that's actually something I really would like to do. Have you done that before?
I have, yeah, only because my mum teaches in a primary school, so I just went to her school and I've been there a couple times now, just like really kind of informally just sharing my experience on a stage in front of some kids and getting them to talk amongst each other about what they think disabilities look like and telling them that disabilities aren't always visible and workshopping that. One thing that's really stuck out to me is that after one of the sessions the teachers wanted all their classes to have pictures with me, which is really cute. And at one of the pictures, a young girl came up to me and she was like, "I have spina bifida, and listening to your story is like listening to me, and I just want to say thank you so much." And I was like, you have no idea how much that means to me. Like, obviously she has an invisible disability as well, so knowing that there is someone older than her that's sharing the experiences just makes it so much easier to deal with what you're going through, and that will always stick with me. So it's like motivating me to do more. So I would definitely just contact schools.
That's so nice, and you kinda just have to think, like, imagine you had someone when you were that age, you know, I
Yeah.
like, who was doing that. You know, you can't change the past, but you can change the future, and that's the thing, as long as you're just helping one person, that's always what I'm thinking, like, with everything I'm trying to do. I'm sure you're the same, like, you know, it's actually incredible being able to help people purely just by sharing experience, because I feel like when you're going through health issues, feeling like the odd one out, feeling like, you know, you're the only one going through it might be the hardest feeling with it. It might be one of the hardest parts of it. So it's just nice to be able to do that. That sounds really nice, and it makes me want to do the same, you know, speaking about it more, visiting schools. That's something I might follow up on now. So thanks.
Well, you've done your first podcast now, so let this be your sign.
Yeah, yeah, and I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me on. Like I just feel like this is I don't like the nature of how short form, let's say TikTok can be. That's swipe, swipe, swipe. It's like what can grab my attention. I much prefer sharing my story in this kind of format. And you know, I think what you're doing is great, and it's actually really cool that you've like just said, right, I'm doing this, and you've had some really great people on, and you kind of just have to think like this is how far you've come now. Like imagine how big this can get. You know, think about how much. I'm not sure. This is probably episode in the 80s, is it? Or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like imagine how
You're a
much more you
fan, I
know
love
now.
that.
I, well, I had to check it out, of course. But you just kind of have to think about like how much you knew with episode one versus how much you know now, and then think
Mm.
about it the same amount of time when you hit episode 160. You know, it'll just keep kind of building and building.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you so much. That really, really means a lot. And like you said, I much prefer this kind of content where we can really deep dive, really get to know some incredible stories, and like yourself, just feel so inspired and educated at the same time. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've really, really enjoyed getting to know you, and hopefully we can keep in touch. Where can we find you on social media?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm on TikTok and Instagram at the moment. It's just my name, Jack Brennan. On TikTok, it's Jack double underscore Brennan, and then on Instagram, it's the same with another underscore at the end. Turns out there's a lot of Jack Brennans. It's quite a common name, but I think if you even search Jack Brennan hip replacement, I should hopefully pop up. So, you know, you can check me out there. I'm hoping to start a new series soon of me trying to learn how to run again, which I think will be
Ooh.
exciting. And I say trying because it might not work, like I might not be able to, but it's just one of those things that I really want to prove a point. And, you know, I've been able to show my recovery, but I think it'd be pretty cool if I could show the journey of me not being even able to run 5 steps now to, you never know, I might actually be able to run. So if
Wow.
that sounds like something that might be interesting, check it out. I just feel like there could be, you know, like you said, educational. Like even if your hips are perfect, there might be something to take from my experience and from
Mm.
other people going through the same thing. So
Yeah. And also, like, if someone's watching a piece of content that, of someone that's like really into run or whatever, and they can do it, I'm like, you should realize that you're taking this for granted, and you should learn to appreciate what you've got, because I used to be able to run, and I can't, like you, I can't run a couple of steps anymore. So I just hope that people out there aren't taking it for granted and making the most of what they've got, I guess. So that sounds like a great series. Can't wait to watch that.
I'm not looking forward to showing me literally not being able to run. Like it doesn't look great, but then again, me not even being able to walk didn't look great either. And look where I've got now, so it's all good.
You
But
guys
yeah, no,
better
thank
check it
you.
out now, okay? Because he's not going to struggle with this for nothing. He's got to get some views out of it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, guys, for having me on. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe someday I'll have my own podcast and I could have you on the other side of it. That'd be cool.
That would be so cool. I'm holding you to that, definitely.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jack, for coming on the podcast, and thank you guys for listening. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like if you're watching on YouTube, and to subscribe or follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and to rate the podcast 5 stars if you haven't already, because that really means the world to me. Don't forget to press the little bell button next to the follow button so you're notified when an episode comes out next. And thank you to Cure LGMD2I and BridgeBio for sponsoring this podcast. I love you guys so much, and I will speak to you very soon. Bye.